This is a classic whistleblower story based upon true life events.
Some very important people are saying our vaccine does not work.
As an actor, you dream about taking on movies that actually have an impact.
Speaking out for something of this magnitude, it takes courage.
You said you're a lawyer, and you want to understand why.
Let me see it.
I don't think people really understand the power that they have.
We'll premiere with the People's Premiere nationwide with your help. Just as we've counted on you before, I am counting on you now to get this film out far and wide.
It's not only supporting the film, it's a message that you are not accepting what they're trying to shove down your throat.
Merck has placed on the market a vaccine that is mislabeled, falsely certified, and presents a serious danger to our children.
This is all about freedom.
Never give up.
Well, hi, Dr. Andrew Wakefield. It's a pleasure to have you on We Knew We Acted today.
Great to be with you, Alex.
I've known you for, I don't know, probably since 2016 or 2017. Oh, when Vaxxed came out, I think I met you on that tour.
2016.
Yeah, 2016. So yeah, I'm going to get a little bit into Vaxxed. I'm going to do an introduction of you right now. So excited to have you on the show. And there's a lot of new people in this vaccine safety movement because people are realizing that COVID shots might not have been so safe. And then that's kind of a window into all the other vaccines maybe not being as safe as people have been told. So I'm going to kind of shortcut your background for some of the newer people and put you in my light, which I think is the best light possible. And then I'll hand it over.
Leave out the bad bits, won't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, leave out all the bad bits. Exactly. So I just want to start out and say, have you guys heard the term Wakefielded? Yes, Dr. Andrew Wakefield's last name has been turned into a verb. I think it means someone honest who became the victim of a witch hunt to destroy their reputation. He is the exemplary guest for We Knew We Acted. We'll be talking about his new film, Protocol 7. But first, since there's so many new people now understanding vaccine dangers, I'm going to do a brief sketch of his background just to get everybody here up to speed. As you listen to Dr. Wakefield in this interview today, you can decide if the human being speaking honestly cares about the health of our children, or if he comes off as the shyster he's been framed as. You be the judge. In the 1990s, Dr. Andrew Wakefield was the head of gastroenterology at the prestigious Royal Free Hospital in London. This is a top-rated teaching hospital. Mothers of kids with autism implored him to study their kids' digestive issues, which they all said began after the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine called the MMR. He finally agreed to do the study, publishing with a dozen co-authors in 1998 a 12-child case study about the bowel disorder in the prestigious journal, The Lancet. This was a case series to begin investigation on a health topic, not a policy-changing paper. In that paper, which was later retracted after Dr. Wakefield himself was blamed for a decline in measles, mumps, and rubella vaccination, Dr. Wakefield never claimed the MMR vaccine caused autism. That sentence, literally or implied, does not exist in that paper. Yet the Rupert Murdoch-funded media literally blamed Dr. Wakefield for the decline in uptake of that vaccine, kicking off their witch hunt, and they still call him the father of the anti-vaccination movement. He and his co-authors merely concluded that yes, there was a novel bowel disorder in all children in that study, and confirmed their parents' observations that yes, these children had developed developmental regression. That was the conclusion. It seems odd to say that publication of a 12-child case study on a bowel disorder is when the anti-vax movement really took off, doesn't it? Even a 16-year-old high school news anchor in California contacted me when she easily found and read Dr. Wakefield's infamous Lancet study. She instantly confirmed what I had told her. Dr. Wakefield never concluded that the MMR vaccine caused autism. She was perplexed. We should all be perplexed as well. Why would a government launch a witch hunt accusing such a fine and dedicated physician of publishing a fraudulent study as a pretense to strip him of his medical license? Today, Dr. Wakefield works as a filmmaker and has authored books, including one about his side of the MMR debacle called Callous Disregard. I highly recommend reading it. His filmmaking career took off with the underground blockbuster hit Vaxxed, which tells the story of a CDC whistleblower, Dr. William Thompson, who confessed on a recorded line that the CDC had literally thrown in the trash can the CDC's own data that does implicate the MMR vaccine in causing autism. He then produced a film about how the US government gave vaccine manufacturers liability protection from vaccine harms in 1986. It's called 1986, The Act. And he then produced a film called Infertility, a diabolical agenda. Now he's back with perhaps his best film yet, called Protocol 7. He's going to tell you more about it right now. In short, he's turned the tables once again to show us who the fraudsters really are. It's about how Merck cheated in their clinical trials when developing the mumps vaccine. That story involves rabbit blood and an ongoing court case, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. Just wait until you hear it yourself from Dr. Wakefield. So please join me in the warmest of welcomes to Dr. Andrew Wakefield to We Knew, We Acted. Thanks for being here, Andy.
Great to be with you, Alix. Thank you.
So was that introduction accurate?
It was. I wasn't actually the head of gastroenterology at the Royal Free. I ran a team of about 19 people, and I was, yes, I never quite made it to head of the department.
Oh yeah, something happened along the way.
Absolutely, I lost my job. So that's what I ended up in this great country, in the great state of Texas.
Well, we're happy to have you in the United States, and we wish it were under different circumstances, but you've really made lemonade out of lemons, I'd say. So you've become a filmmaker exposing the real fraudsters, and now you're coming out with a new film called Protocol 7, which you're premiering in different cities. Can you tell us a little bit about how that project came about?
Certainly. I guess it's essentially a story. At the core of it, it's a story of a mother's love and intuition pitted against the might, the power of the pharmaceutical industry. And it's a sort of classical whistleblower story. Over the years, because of the position I've taken on vaccine safety, bodily autonomy, public health, people have come to me from federal agencies such as the CDC or from the industry, the vaccine manufacturers, and said, we've done a terrible thing. William Thompson's story came in directly through Brian Hooker, great friend of mine, a scientist. And that was one such story of MMR vaccine fraud at the CDC. And historically, when I was still practicing science, running a science team, I would hand these off to False Claims Act lawyers, public interest lawyers, who would deal with them according to their merits. And then I thought, I was screenwriting at the time, and I love film, and I thought these would make wonderful films. And they'd taken everything away from me, so all I had to adapt and survive. And I became a filmmaker, and I thought, well, I can now become your worst enemy, because in the clinic, you can help one child at a time. But when you make a movie, then you can show it to hundreds of thousands of people, and they can be educated, entertained, and enlightened. So that's how this story came about. It was a young man came to me at a conference many years ago and said, I work for Merck's MMR vaccine laboratory, and I've been asked to commit scientific fraud, and I've refused. And we got into a series of exchanges which ultimately led to this story. It's been a long time coming, because even though the screenplay was written as early as 2012, I wanted to give the court case, which is ongoing at the moment, a chance to play out. But my priority was the well-being of the children of this country. They should not continue to be exposed to this vaccine, which does not work and is, as a consequence, dangerous for reasons that we can go into. And so I decided that we just had to get on with it, get this film made. It's in the middle of, it's actually in the heat of litigation at the moment. And
very long litigation.
A long litigation, absolutely.
How many years?
It's been in litigation for well over a decade.
That's what I thought.
And that's too long. It's too long, and people continue to be exposed to this vaccine, which is the subject of Merck's deception. And so at the time had come hell or high water to get the film out there and let the public know.
Good for you. Yeah, it's been in the courts for way too long, which is kind of a lawfare tactic to really never issue a judgment on a case like this. And that tells you something about what they think the judgment should be. And there's a reason they keep kicking the can down the road in the courts, right?
Yeah, and the guilty parties move on. They go on to other jobs. They don't care about the longevity of Merck or the vaccine program, or indeed the well-being of American children. They just move on, they collect their bonus, and off they go. And this film demands accountability. After making Vaxxed and seeing how the CDC perpetrators of the fraud got away with it. They went on and collected their pension. The taxpayer kept on paying them there, and nothing, no consequences for them whatsoever, despite putting millions of American children in harm's way with a serious permanent neurological condition. They just moved on, and I just thought, well, that's not going to happen with this film. We're going to get it out there, and people are going to be held accountable.
Absolutely. So you said the script for this film, Protocol 7, was written in 2012?
It was written in 2012, and then I went to live in Los Angeles for a while to get it finished with a friend of mine. I got out of Los Angeles really as quickly as I could. As Terry Rossio co-wrote, helped me finish the film, and Terry, people don't ever give credit to screenwriters, really. People say, oh, who's Terry Rossio? Never heard of him. Well, he wrote little-known stories like Shrek and Pirates of the Caribbean and Aladdin and Godzilla versus King Kong. So I was in very good company in finishing up the writing of this film.
Oh, absolutely. That's an incredible get, as they say in Hollywood, that you got to partner with Terry Rossi, and he's going to the premieres with you, right?
I believe Terry's coming to the LA premiere on Friday.
Oh, wonderful. I'll be there as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Yeah. So you ended up making Vaxxed first in 2015 about a different fraud at the CDC. But this fraud is one that occurred at Merck. And Merck doesn't exactly have clean hands, right? They've been in court a number of times for Vioxx, and there are 50 cases against them for Gardasil right now. But the case that you feature in Protocol 7, it's about their mumps vaccine, or the mumps portion of the MMR vaccine, more accurately, right?
That's right. Yes, they knew as of the sort of mid to late 1990s that vaccine was not working. It was really out of specification, which meant that it was not as effective as they had claimed on their product license application.
Can we double click on that? How did we know it wasn't effective? Was it that naval ship where everybody got mumps, even though everybody was vaccinated? Was it the outbreaks of mumps at colleges? How did we know?
Yeah, I mean, the public came to learn of this with outbreaks in highly vaccinated populations. So there was a big outbreak at Harvard, a big outbreak in Northwest Arkansas, that outbreak on the battleship. Yes, absolutely. And these outbreaks were in people who'd had 2-3 doses of the vaccine. They were fully vaccinated, and yet they developed mumps. And the worst thing about this is that mumps as a child is trivial, but mumps as an adult is not trivial when you've gone past puberty. And men are at much greater risk of testicular inflammation and infertility, and women of ovarian inflammation, and both sexes at increased risk of encephalitis or meningitis. So what you have is a vaccine that does not work, and because it does not work, and people become susceptible again when they're older, it makes mumps a more dangerous disease. So here you have a situation in which the vaccine has made mumps a more dangerous disease. So it's not just the efficacy, the protectiveness, it's safety as well.
Right. It's safety because it's not working. And you're saying people get it when they're older, which is a lot more dangerous for their fertility and for our body parts involved in fertility. So, okay, so we knew it wasn't working. And then we also knew that the vaccine itself isn't safe, right? So what did we know about the safety?
Well, what should have happened at that stage, just to sort of complete that element of the story, is realizing that it wasn't safe. Merck should have withdrawn the vaccine, stopped manufacturing it, issued a recall of the vaccine, and the CDC should have stopped buying it. Everybody who had been exposed to that potentially ineffective vaccine should have been told, but none of that happened. As you can imagine, that was contrary to the policy that the bottom line is everything, and our stockholders are the only people we're really answerable to. And so that it continued to be on the market. And I think that the FDA were equally culpable in this, in not demanding that there was a cessation of this vaccine and that there was, at the very least, a product recall. People were informed and efforts should have been made to develop a newer, safer vaccine. If that's, they wanted to continue with the policy of vaccination. None of that happened.
Were you one of the whistleblowers at the time pressuring the FDA? Like who was putting pressure on the FDA at that time?
Well, the whistleblower himself. So one of the main characters in the movie and a real life character who is in fact the hero of this story was the one who came to me in Chicago and gave me this information. But he was asked to participate in the fraud as a member of the laboratory staff, as was one of his female colleagues, Joan Wolkowski. And they both refused. They said, we're not doing this. This is scientific fraud. And moreover, and this is a measure of the character of the man, moreover, I'm going to report you to the FDA. So here he is as an employee of Merck saying, I'm going to report you to the FDA. So all kinds of threats were made against him. But to his enormous credit, as they carried on with the fraudulent testing of this vaccine, he did report them to the FDA. And the FDA came, and the FDA said in their summary that raw data were being changed without justification. That is definitely fraud. There it was. The FDA said. So, moreover, at that stage, even before that stage, but at that stage, that vaccine should have gone off the production line. But it didn't. They carried on. Why? I suspect because they didn't want to undermine public confidence, not in the vaccine, but in themselves. It really comes down to themselves. If the public lose confidence in the public health authorities and the regulators, then it's gone forever. Right. So rather than put the well-being of children first, they put the well-being of the program and themselves first. Their credibility was on the line and they put themselves first. And this has become manifestly obvious to so many people as a consequence of COVID, which is a point you made earlier. The deception, the lies, the fraud, the manipulation, the greed. I mean, it's absolutely staggering. And they've only got themselves to blame. So you'll see all kinds of wild claims and reviews about how this is Wakefield's sort of conspiracy theory, anti-vaccine propaganda dressed up as a movie. No, these people have only got themselves to blame. And when you look, as you pointed out, at the pharmaceutical companies, including Merck, they've paid out billions in fines for criminal activities in the courts. The governments of the world are doing business with international crime consortia.
That's right. That's well, and it is really, anybody watching this, there is a live stream of the actual court hearing on July 9th. It's a real court case. This is in the courts, people. This is not someone's conspiracy theory. But Dr. Wakefield, I'd like to take you back to what you said about the whistleblower, and he turned them in. He kept working at Merck, but refused to work on the mumps vaccine, maybe. I'm not really sure what happened then. But are you going to get into what they did with the mumps vaccine to cheat, or do we have to wait for the film? I don't want to do a spoiler, as they call it, but it's really fascinating what went on there.
You're going to have to wait.
Okay,
You're
all
going
I can
to
say,
have to see the movie.
It involves rabbit blood.
It does.
Right? Yes.
Absolutely.
So you have to find out what that means by going to Protocol 7. But
Yeah.
okay, so that whistleblower, he stayed working at Merck after whistleblowing. Did he have whistleblower protection?
He stayed there briefly, but that was untenable. He then, after we met, he filed under the False Claims Act through lawyers and thereby was protected as a whistleblower. And so, he was protected from any harassment by Merck, which is a key part of that legislation or that. And it's had a huge impact on his life. It's not an easy road to pursue. Anybody who's been down that path as a whistleblower realizes that there's very little upside to it other than the knowledge that you are doing the right thing.
That's right. Yeah, it's a very difficult road. And, you've basically been a whistleblower since they took away your medical license, or when they first threatened to take it away. You are, I mean, you are one of our heroes in this movement, and they call you the father of the anti-vaccine movement. You're anything but. You are a hero to anybody who really knows your story. So we
Well,
owe
you're very
you.
kind, Alex. I'm not really a hero. It's a matter of doing what I signed up to do when I went into medical practice, is to put the patient first above all other considerations. And when they tried to stop the work and say, look, this isn't going to be good for your career, I said, well, yeah, what about these children? What about the epidemic of this neurodevelopmental disorder? What am I going to do? Go back to the clinic and say to the mother with her child beside her, well, I'm terribly sorry. I know what you're saying is true and is entirely valid, but there's the door behind you. Would you take your child and leave? Am I going to do that? No.
Right. What kind of
No,
doctor
that wasn't
would you
even
be?
that wasn't even on the cards. And yet, sadly, for many of my colleagues, that was the option they chose. What we've seen now with COVID, however, is a great number of very eminent people standing up against it. They paid a price. Peter McCullough, the world's leading cardiologist, 750 publications plus, and loses his job because he tells the truth. And people like that are now standing in the breach, and that makes a huge difference.
It does. And Dr. Paul Thomas, whose study was published about his patients, his 13,000 pediatric patients, and upon publication, his medical board in Oregon pulled his medical license. I mean, it's insane. It's the same story playing out again and again. And it's a wonder to me that people can't see the pattern here. Almost every vaccinated versus unvaccinated study was pulled after publication because our government doesn't want anybody to see that data. But the only way we're going to see that data is for these independent researchers to keep doing those studies because our government won't do those studies. And as Dr. Wakefield knows, in the 1986 Act that was passed, they were supposed to be doing a study on children's vaccine safety every 2 years, our own government. They've never done it. But that's another thing that takes us back to Protocol 7. In your film, The Act, you talk about how the manufacturers were given a liability shield. And so people want to understand, like, well, if I'm injured by a vaccine, I can't go to court and sue Merck directly. I've got to go to U.S. vaccine court where all the cards are stacked against me. Tell everybody how these cases can actually go to court, because it is a loophole where you can sue the manufacturer.
Well, the 1986 Act made it extremely difficult for individuals who are harmed or potentially harmed by the vaccine to get any kind of justice. The manufacturers said to the government, and this was in the context of the old wholesale pertussis vaccine originally, said, okay, if we get sued for the damage done by this vaccine in court and it costs us millions, we're going to go out of business. And so either you indemnify us so we stop making vaccines, children will die, and it'll be your fault. How do you feel about that? So the government's feet were effectively held to the fire. I mean, that was the subtext, and subtext in filmmaking is everything. And so they got the 1986 Act passed. And just to say, Alex, it's pouring with rain here. I don't know whether you can hear it or it's disturbing your a little bit.
Just a tiny,
because that's okay, no problem.
It's okay.
And so that what was happened is a tax was levied on every vaccine sold, and that tax was paid by the taxpayer, and that tax went into a pot of money that was then distributed or not by what's known in common parlance as the vaccine court. And here you have an administrative judge, if you like, but not a judge in legal terms, sitting there, and he might have been someone whose training was in tax law, but there he is making judgments about complex issues. The parents have to prove the case. It's not that the manufacturers or anyone else, the government, has to prove that the vaccine didn't cause it. It's up to the parents, the plaintiffs, and their lawyers to prove that it did. How can they do that? They're dealing with a vaccine-injured child. They have no money. They have no laboratory. They don't have PhDs. How could they possibly go through the complex process against the might of the American government with all of its taxpayer money there to be wasted?
Right. And
proving
they
a
have to find
case.
the money.
Yeah. And they have
Sorry.
a 3-year window of to make a claim. So here you are as a parent with your injured child. You're not sleeping at night. You only discover that they've got a diagnosis of autism some stage late in the game. Up to that point, they've just been behaving very, very oddly, and you've been trying to get on the waiting list to get them assessed. And then 3 years and it runs out. There, your window of opportunity has gone. Now, for most claims, most medical injury claims, you have until the age of 21. So that if you're injured as a child, you have until the age of 21 to file your case. But not with vaccines. You have 3 years and that's it, you're out. So the odds are stacked so heavily against parents, and yet in the order of $5 billion have been paid out in vaccine injury claims that have been won in this court system. So despite the fact that the odds are stacked so badly, so heavily against parents and their children, it's still been a massive payout. So that system has got to be overhauled completely. It's got to be changed because it really isn't working. And the fact that the manufacturers have no liability is appalling, because what they have is a perfect business model. A mandatory market, kids have to be vaccinated to go to school. No liability, all they can do is make a profit. Expand the vaccine program, get more vaccines on the recommended schedule, money, 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 money.
Exactly. And that was the whole ruse with the COVID vaccines, is the race to get them on the children's schedule, because as soon as they came off of EUA, they didn't have liability protection. So they were scared. They had that gap. And so as soon as they could, they got it on the children's schedule to get them that liability protection, not just for children, but for anybody whose arm it's injected into. So, okay, so that's how cases are dealt with because of this 1986 act. But there is a loophole which allows a lawsuit against Merck or a vaccine manufacturer for their vaccine, which is why there is this case against Merck for the mumps vaccine. Can you explain what the loophole is?
The loophole is fraud. You know, you are protected under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, unless, as far as I'm aware, you've committed fraud, and if you've committed fraud, in other words, you've deceived the government in selling the vaccine to them, as they sell it to the CDC in their Vaccines for Children program, then you can be sued. And so the hope is that if there are plaintiffs, if there are people who've been injured as a consequence of this fraud, then they will come forward and be compensated. The other one that's just emerged and is fascinating, just in the last week or so, in the Ninth Circuit, the appeals court, is that they've ruled that the COVID shot is not a vaccine at all. It doesn't protect you against getting infected. It doesn't protect against transmission. It's not what we were told it was. And therefore, if it's not a vaccine, it's not protected under any vaccine law at all. It's considered to be a therapeutic, and they can be sued, and let them be sued.
That is a major decision, and I think it was just docketed. So it is a decision that other cases, I believe, can now reference for other lawsuits. I mean, it's a really big deal. Yeah, the COVID shots do not prevent transmission. Therefore, that has been the basic definition of a vaccine, as defined by this defining case, believe it or not, from 1905 called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And that was a case about the smallpox vaccine, which was presumed to stop transmission. But because the COVID vaccines don't stop transmission, you cannot use the case Jacobson versus Massachusetts to help argue your case anymore. It's done. So yeah, it opens up a lot of liability on vaccine manufacturers. It's a really big deal, you guys. So because there was fraud in the mumps vaccine development, that's why there's a case in the courts. And so this has been a really interesting conversation, Dr. Wakefield. Was it really difficult to get cast and crew for this film, because not everybody wants to be seen as, quote, anti-vax?
No, in fact, it was remarkably easy. A lot of actors had been thrown off various productions, or not allowed to even to audition for certain productions, because they would not comply with vaccine mandates that their union had passed down. And then industries or people like Netflix would demanded that everybody on set be vaccinated. And some people just stood up and said, no, it doesn't matter if I don't work, I can deal with that, but I'm not going to be told what I've got to do. And so we were a non-union production, and we said, we don't care whether you've been vaccinated or not. That is your choice. This is a film that is, we want the best people for the job, and we're not going to discriminate against you on the basis that you won't be tested or wear a mask or any of those things. They didn't exist on our, and so did that make it difficult? Well, for Rachel's part, we had 2,500 young women applying for that role, sending in reels for that role, and we narrowed it down, and we have absolutely no doubt we made the right choice in that respect. Matthew Marsden, who plays the doctor in the story, Matthew Marsden again found himself unable to get any kind of employment in movies. He simply couldn't until we came along, and he was delighted. He stood by his principles. He has 9 children. He has a lot of mouths to feed, and it was taking a huge toll on him, but he had the courage to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to comply with this. And so these people were made very welcome on our set, as were the crew and the production team. And yeah, it was a fascinating experience.
Wow. Well, that's great to hear. I'm really happy for those actors, and that's an incredible role to get when 2,500 other people applied. That's incredible. That's a nod to the fact that Andy is onto the truth, and a lot of actors will work for the truth. So there's going to be a lot of screenings of Protocol 7 in theaters coming up.
It's been picked up by Regal Cinemas, so it will go out as a standard theatrical release.
Wow. In
early June, and it's been picked up by Cineplex in Canada in every province, so it'll go out there. So it's really, it's won, as of today, I think 22, 23 movie awards, and it's getting some great reviews. So we're very, very pleased. We're very pleased with the way it's going, but we want to please people, get it out there. The important thing, the thing that will make this film a success, rather like Sound of Freedom, is for those who've watched it, those who care about this issue, to bring along to the next screening 10 people that they know, friends, family, people with whom they've argued over the dinner table, who hold a completely different position to them on COVID vaccines or COVID shots, whatever it may be, and bring them, and don't say, I told you so, simply say, I would value your opinion on this movie that I saw recently. It makes a lot of sense to me. I want to hear what you think of it. And you get, once you open that window, you let a little bit of light in, then you really start to change people's minds. So 10, we call it 10 by 10. You know, everybody brings 10 people, and they all bring 10 people. And suddenly, you know, the majority of the adult population of North America have seen the film and have formed their own opinions. So, yeah, it really comes down to the public. So any help that you can give us with that, Alix, we'd be eternally grateful.
Absolutely. Well, that is so exciting that you've had such an incredible response, and the awards and all the theaters taking it in. That's absolutely incredible. You don't, for people new to this issue, you don't see that in the films in this world about vaccine dangers. You don't see this kind of response to this that Protocol 7 is getting. This is highly unusual, and it's just a testament to how good this film is, how experienced Dr. Andrew Wakefield is now as a director. And I've heard great things about it. I've heard we need to bring Kleenex to the film, but also bring 10 friends. Free Now Foundation is going to be doing a screening in Palo Alto at the Aquarius Theater on June 26th. We need more than delighted to bring this film to California, and hopefully a lot of others will do the same. And let me just give you the last word, Dr. Wakefield. Is there anything else you want people to know before we close out?
Yeah, please. The power of this film, the importance of this film is in really in the mother's intuition, the mother's knowledge of their child, and being able to restore a mother's faith in that, the power of that intuition. The man in the white coat, the woman in the white coat have tried to take it away. I know your child better than you do. No, you don't. No, you do not. And mothers know when their children are well and when they're ill, and have an instinct what is right and wrong. And please learn to trust in that instinct, because it served us very well since the sort of beginning of the evolutionary history. And it's something that medicine has tried to usurp, and we need to set that balance straight again. It's so important. It's been a guiding light in my medical career, and I think it's really the main theme that comes through this story, is how the mother can take on the power of the industry and get to the end of the film, which I'm not going to spoil for you.
I love it. Well, thank you for not giving any spoilers. I'm really excited to see it. I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen the trailer. And let's wish you and Protocol 7 the best of luck. You deserve it after everything you've been through. You're a hero to so many, and you should be a hero to absolutely everyone who's ever heard your name. And I want to make it that way.
Alix, thank you very much. Great pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Wakefield.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.